Wow. Okay, so this news, this New York stuff, right? It's heavy.
Yeah.
Like multiple incidents, all violent, all in one weekend, makes you wonder what's going on.
It's definitely a lot to unpack.
It is. It is. So like is this like a blip on the radar or is this, a sign of something bigger, something worse?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, big cities, they unfortunately see this kind of thing more often than we'd like.
Right, right.
But still, looking for patterns, trying to see the bigger picture, that's important, always.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's dive into this. This story about Vianel Garcia
Hmm.
in the park, Fort Washington Park, right?
Yes.
That one really got to me. A park. You go to a park for peace, for quiet, and this happens.
And it was her own son, allegedly, pushed her during an argument. She went down an embankment. Just awful.
Awful. And the thing is, it brings up this whole other issue, right? Mental health resources. They're just not there for everyone, are they?
It's a huge factor, no question, especially for folks who are already vulnerable, struggling another way.
Exactly. And from what I read, Miss Garcia, she'd come here from the Dominican Republic, built a life for herself, hairdresser. People who knew her, they said, like, the best person in the world.
Heartbreaking. And then you see her son, Miguel, he was in a homeless shelter, had a prior assault charge.
It's just tragic all around.
Yeah.
That makes you wonder about, like, the pressures, the desperation.
It all ties together, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Poverty, lack of opportunity, potential mental health issues. It's a recipe for, well, for disaster sometimes.
It is. And tragically, Miss Garcia's story, it's not the only one, right? We had Richard Vasquez stabbed in the Bronx.
Right, and then Thomas Misellen shot after an argument, and Dion Williams found unconscious in Brooklyn. He later died.
And these weren't all over the city, right? These were clustered together.
Geographically close, which tells you something, too. Certain areas, they just bear the brunt of this more than others.
It's true. And it's easy to get caught up in the individual tragedies, but you mentioned something important before about the bigger picture. The article, it mentioned that the 33rd precinct, where Mrs. Garcia was killed, they've had the same number of murders this year as last year.
Which tells us this isn't an anomaly, sadly. This is part of a trend, a deeply troubling one.
So what do we do? I mean, where do we even begin to address this?
Honestly, it's a complex issue with no easy solutions. But awareness is key. We need to be talking about this, putting pressure on our leaders to prioritize violence prevention.
Okay, so advocating for change at the top, that's one thing. But what about, like, at a community level? What can we do as individuals?
So much of this stems from systemic issues, poverty, lack of resources, volunteering at local organizations, donating to shelters, even just checking in on your neighbors. Those small acts can have a ripple effect.
It's a lot to process, but I think you've given us some good things to think about,
Yeah.
even if it's just starting a conversation.
Absolutely, because these aren't just statistics on a page. These are real people, real lives lost. And we
Yeah.
can't just become numb to it.
We can't. We can't.